I have left my video off because the bandwidth where I am is very low. If you can see on the picture here, this little dot here is me in the north of the Philippines, where recently there was a super typhoon which created a lot of devastation. So I'm here working with the World Bank on looking at some of the post-disaster work here. So it's now after 3 o'clock in the morning, and I joined you at 10 o'clock to see whether the connection would work, and I'm still here. I was being riveted by the conversations, so I thought I might get a couple of hours sleep, but I've been happily listening in, and it's been a terrific session this evening, or this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you are. And it's great to see so many people here. So listening to the sessions that you've been through with building your career, building skills, I'm looking a little bit more at building bridges to the future. So if you think even this session that we're having here today is building bridges right across the world. We're linking together, we're discussing really important issues, and I'm sure that this will not be the last time that EvalYouth connect together in this way and build bridges together. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit, if I can, oh, there we go. Okay, oh, too far. Okay, so building bridges, you actually can't see the bottom of this screen here, but this is a bridge that I was going over just yesterday. And it's one of the few surviving bridges that are left here. And what an important aspect of building bridges is that there's no point in building a bridge if you don't have a reason to get to the other side. And so the other side for Eval SDGs is actually reaching the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, or sometimes we call them the global goals. And I'm sure that many of you will have heard of them. And Eval SDGs is a twin of EvalYouth. We were actually launched at the very same time, just after the SDGs were launched in September 2015, during the Eval year that you've been hearing about. So what does Eval SDGs do? It's a global network as well, very similar to EvalYouth. And it's looking at dialogue and advocacy and knowledge generation in relation to evaluation and the SDGs. And similar to you as well, linking our own members, yes, but other stakeholders who are related to evaluation practice and activities that are engaged in the SDGs. And as you've been hearing, the evaluation practice is getting more diverse and more complex. The toolbox is getting bigger, and this is really important in relation to the 17 SDGs. Eval SDGs is also trying to strengthen capacity in support to SDGs implementation and review process. Some of you will be aware of the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, which preceded the Sustainable Development Goals. And it was found that the review processes there weren't in depth enough to really understand what was working and why, and therefore how they could be improved. So evaluation, we hope, will play a really big role with the SDGs. And then looking at how you build bridges between evaluation initiatives. I'm sure a number of you think, well, what is the work that I'm doing with evaluation, and how does that link to what other people in other countries or in other sectors are doing in evaluation. So one of the things that we're really interested in is seeing how evaluation learning can link together to really deepen and widen knowledge in relation to the SDGs. So I'm pretty sure that all of you will know what the SDGs are, but just in case, I thought it's important to just touch base on that, is that they were created in 2015, as I mentioned, launched in September. 17 goals, as you can see here, and I'm sure many of you will be familiar with them. But there's 169 targets across those 17 goals. And a lot of people say, my goodness, that's an awful lot. But actually, if you say there are a certain number of indicators per SDG, and not everybody is going to focus on all of the SDGs. An important thing about the SDGs is that they're priorities for all nations. So the Millennium Development Goals were focused more on specific developing, if you like, nations. But as we've increasingly realized, is that every single country has its challenges, that you may have extreme poverty in some countries, but in other countries which are quite affluent, you've still got homeless people, you've got drug use, and as Kate said, that evaluation really is looking at how you can improve aspects for all people. And actually Stuart mentioned it as well. That was a great illustration he had of the evaluation theory river leading down to the lake of societal improvement. And in a way, the SDGs are our lake of societal improvement that we can all contribute to. Another important thing to remember is the SDGs were developed through a very extensive global consultation process. So in terms of stakeholder engagement, there's been civil society, private sector, government, and so that level of stakeholder engagement is really important for evaluators to understand and to link in with. So there's a terminology that is coming through with the SDGs that's important for the EAs to, sorry, this is a bit sensitive, there we go, is localization of the SDGs. So how can you get involved in whatever is being done with the SDGs within your own country, within your own area, within the sector that you work? And this is a new bridge that we're trying to cross at the moment. We're working with a number of countries to say, how do you actually take the 17 SDGs and bring those down to the level of the country? And so what we can do is we can promote the importance of evaluation in that process and support the evaluation communities, particularly through the VOPEs, which I know you now know the terminology of, to know about the SDGs, because there are many people who are in the evaluation sector but who are not aware of some of the growing practices around evaluation, the SDGs. Another factor is orienting and supporting government activities. There was a question earlier on, is evaluation only in the international development sector? Absolutely not. That there is much going on within each country, and that within government, in civil society organizations, within the private sector. So the idea of the SDGs is to really push forward from all directions towards the SDGs, and particularly with a focus on the catch cry of the SDGs is to make sure that no one gets left behind. And that comes down to a lot of the social equity issues that you've heard both Kate and Donna talking about. So why do the YEs, the Young and Emerging Evaluators, play a special role in evaluation in the SDGs? Well, for one thing, by 2030, the current leaders in evaluations will be gone. So the young and emerging evaluators at the moment will be the SDG evaluation leaders of the future. So it would be really great for you all to be aware of the SDGs and how that actually links into your practice. And you've already heard that there's a big demand for evaluation. And this is one of the areas where there is a big demand for evaluation. We've spoken to many countries about their plans for the SDGs, and many of them are hungry to know, how can we do evaluation in a better way? How can that actually help us to move faster towards the particular SDGs that we're interested in? So if by 2030, if the young and emerging evaluators don't get on board with SDGs evaluation and use the practices that you're learning and the new techniques that are coming up to contribute to better outcomes, then I believe that the SDG targets and global benefits that can come from this whole initiative won't be achieved in the way that they could be. So I do believe that young evaluators now have both an opportunity and perhaps a responsibility to really look at the SDGs and how the evaluation sector can contribute. So I've heard through a number of the presentations about complexity, and certainly it's one of the things that keeps coming up with SDGs, is that people saying, oh, it's 17, why is 17? That's a really weird number. Well, that's basically what the consultation process brought it down to. And yes, within the SDGs there are complexities, like in SDG 2, although it talks about hunger, it also talks about good nutrition. And that's a completely different process, perhaps, for some countries, rather than dealing with severe malnutrition. You've also got obesity. So very different strategies in different countries. So where you have complexity, the evaluator can create a bridge between different areas. Stuart was talking about evaluation being transdisciplinary. So if you're going to be trans, you're spanning across. So how do you span across different disciplines in relation to the SDGs? That this is, again, an area where what we're talking about is not necessarily you taking on really complex evaluations, but being complexity aware. So understanding that something that you're working on in one sector may be connected to another, like working in a health program may also need to consider transportation or access to water. I absolutely agree with you, Laura, on that fresh ideas and fresh energies and all sorts of knowledge, there's huge contribution that young evaluators can bring. So how do we apply SDGs in evaluation work? So obviously I'm going to pick the example that's most in my mind at the moment, and looking at how the area that I'm in, and thanks to my colleague for these photographs from today, which he quickly downloaded for me. It was a Category 5 typhoon. There were damages to bridges, the children can't go to school, products can't get in and out of various towns, no services can get access across the rivers when you actually have destroyed infrastructure. The bridge here was washed out. So you can see that one activity, one thing that's occurred really impacts on people in very many different ways. And in the past, we've tended to separate out different impacts. But here, these are real people dealing with real situations and complex situations. So across this very rickety set of planks is going all the food in and out of this community. People are going to work in this way and trying to come back in this way, but no trucks are getting in and out. So in terms of volume, people are struggling. There's still no power after 6 weeks. But there's some very interesting learning from the process, that this time there were no deaths in terms of such a strong typhoon. And why was that? Because emergency management systems that had been a focus through climate change planning, which is part of SDG 13, has actually been successful. So people were prepared, there was more advance warning, people knew what to do, so the community information was very successful. The coordination to get people moving as quickly as possible was excellent. So SDG 17, we're learning how to create partnerships in better ways, that it's no longer, you know, this isn't my job. It's a matter of working together in teams to address certain issues. Good learning for many other situations. However, the road and the bridge infrastructure were damaged, and the feeling is that those could have been better climate proofed. So that's going to lead to a new design in terms of infrastructure and to what they say, build back better, so that next time there's a severe storm event, there's actually consideration and learning from these kind of events. So you can see that in one picture of a bridge that is no longer functional, there's a lot of lessons across different sectors. So the no one left behind. The poorest families are the hardest hit. And we nearly didn't go to this area because it was further away, it was more difficult to get to, we had to go up muddy roads to get there. But we learned a lot from doing that the poorest, the furthest away families are the hardest hit because they have insecure housing. So they suffered the greatest damage. And they don't have savings because even just to cross this river, they had to pay 20 pesos per person per trip. So how do they get the money? So they really struggle very much. But also on the platform there, I don't know if you can see it, there are actually electricity workers who are getting out there and trying to get essential services back into operation. So the transportation systems, which is SDG 10, so the poverty, the equity, that's something that really had to be considered in this aspect, and realize which areas are the hardest hit and which people needed help the most. So linking the findings from this particular evaluative activity to evaluations that are being done in similar incidents in other countries can really help emergency management, not just in single locations, not just in single countries, but actually across different countries. And that's part of what the SDGs are looking at, is how can we use innovation and how can we use evaluation and learning to get better outcomes, not only in specific situations, but for all. So what can you do in terms of the SDGs? Certainly you could be informed and up to date about the SDGs process. There's heaps of information online. I'm sure some of you are already following that, the databases. And as Laura already mentioned, you can promote new ideas and methods. This is a completely new frontier in terms of the ability to use big data, the communication tools. So there's some really interesting opportunities in future that you can do to make new ground in evaluation. As Stuart mentioned, still one further over, there we go. As Stuart mentioned, no matter which direction you come into, the SDGs need all of you. So you might be great in data analysis, or your particular focus might be in good communication of evaluation results or building participation. There's a lot of work at the moment on policy and strategy evaluations to see how policies and strategies need to be shifted, and technical expertise, whether it be in health, engineering, urban drainage. So the skies are a bit limitless there in terms of opportunity for evaluation in the SDGs. So here's a very practical suggestion, is have a look at them and have a look at the one which you think is most attuned to your work, and then look into the indicators in more detail and the targets and see how does that connect with what you're doing. My favorite is SDG 17. I'll be interested to hear what some of yours are once you've looked at it. And that's me. Thank you very much for listening to me. You can't see me, so and I'm not sure if we have time for questions.